I'm Sherilyn Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 306 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. And today we're talking about how to process hard life experiences, heartaches, and disappointments. So welcome back to the show, my friends. I want to talk to you today if you are in a tender place. If this is a time in your life, maybe a season of your life, maybe just a particular day or week or episode where you are going through something hard. And some seasons just seem to come with those experiences. You know, they're like, we're all done with the lessons. Thank you very much. We would like to get back to our regularly scheduled programming. And yet they just keep coming. And I was reflecting when I was putting this episode together on some of the things that I've been confronted with in this season, which is actually on whole a pretty good season. Like things are going pretty well in my life. There's a lot of really positive things happening. And yet there are also a handful of these difficult experiences that have sort of been dropped into my lap or crossed my path, some of them within my own family, some of them within our client community. And so I want to kind of dimensionalize, what do I mean by a hard life experience or a heartache or a disappointment, so that you can find yourself in this. And you probably don't need any help at all, right? You probably can call to mind immediately what is hard for you right now. But these might be things like, I have a client who had a foot injury that is going to cause her to be in a boot for 8 weeks. Now, if you knew me in real life and not just as a podcast host, you would know that this is one of my worst fears. My family and I have a running joke that if I ever end up in a boot, I'm going to rent a place on the coast of Maine and hang out there until I'm healed. Like, I just can't wrap my head around how I would function. I have so much empathy for people who are trying to navigate their day-to-day lives while wearing a boot. I don't know why that's the thing for me, but it's one of these things I really live in fear of. So this sweet client was sharing that she had just come down wrong in a move during a workout and ended up with this fracture that's going to lead to 8 weeks in a boot. That's a hard experience, right? It's a disappointment. It's a difficulty. It's something that she has to kind of wrap her head around, right? It could be something like losing a job, you know, and finding out that your company is downsizing or restructuring, or that they don't think there's a good fit there for you anymore. It could be, in my family, we had 2 people very close to me, 2 of my uncles, have heart attacks within a week of each other. Both of them, luckily, are doing really well. They have newly inserted stents in both cases, and they're doing really well. But the trauma of the experience, the fear that kind of ran its way through every extension of our family as this happened. These are 2 of my mom's brothers who literally inside of a week had heart attacks. You know, maybe it's a child who doesn't make the team that they wanted to make, or somebody who doesn't get, you know, a part in the play that they really wanted to have. And my personal favorite in this chapter of our life is sending a child to college, which is a heartache. It's also amazing, but comes with its own set of difficult emotions, right, that need to be processed. So hard experiences, heartaches, disappointments, they're a part of life. They are not going to stop coming our way, even when we want them to, even when we think we might benefit from a break. I think the reality is we're going to be confronted. And so the truth is, how we process experiences like this really makes a giant difference in how well we move through them. And I'm carefully stopping short of using the word quickly, like how quickly we move through them, because some of these experiences just won't be moved through quickly, right? They will take the time that they will take. But how well we move through them, right? The sense of equanimity that we can maintain as we're moving through them is really affected by how we process them. So I think about the process of working through these kinds of experiences as having like twin Ps, two things that start with P, twin Ps. And often we instinctively rely really heavily on one or the other. Okay. So I'm going to tell you what they are. And then I want you to think about which one do you more readily lean into. And I'll tell you which one I more readily lean into. So the first P when we're processing a hard life experience, a difficult season, is pain. Okay. This is really deeply rooted in emotion. It might show up as any number of difficult emotions. It could show up as grief or envy or loss, right? Kind of related to grief, or anger could be an emotion, surprise, sort of that element of shock and surprise can be in here. Fear can show up in the emotions. So think about any of the hard experiences happening in your life and really think about what are the emotions that come up. A number of them are going to be associated with pain. And so pain is the first of the twin Ps, might be your go-to place. And I'm going to come back to it and I'm going to unpack that a little bit further, but I want to give you the second one. The second P is perspective. And perspective is the part of processing that's rooted in logic, right? It can be more comfortable for some of us who are more emotionally avoidant. I fit in this camp. I am someone who will jump to perspective, trying really hard to skip over the pain, right? So perspective is the part that is about action and logic and moving forward and trying to get ourselves sort of out of this episode as quickly as possible. And it can be helpful. But the answer to processing these experiences is really in giving both of them their due, right? Giving both pain and perspective their turn, or candidly, as many turns as they need in order to move through the experience. So if you know that you lean toward one or the other, I want you to listen to how well do you make use of kind of your go-to? And then also, what can you learn today about the other side that may help you move through these experiences? So let's go back to pain. Pain is the first part. It's always going to come first. It's going to come in before perspective, whether we acknowledge it or not, right? The disappointment, the grief, the shock, the envy, the anger, whatever our emotional response is to this experience that's happening is going to be there first. And really, our job is to feel it. Ideally, we can name it, because language can be very, very powerful here. Being able to really ask yourself, what is the feeling? What is the emotion that's surfacing for me about this experience can be very powerful. So naming it, which by the way, is not always as easy as we might like. I don't know if you've ever really tried to name your emotions. Some people have been, they've done cognitive behavioral therapy. They have maybe taken classes about psychology or emotions, but some of us really don't have a great emotional vocabulary. So we just have a few words that we can use to name how we're feeling. It's a great idea you can just Google this, like one of those charts of emotion words. They're usually called an emotion wheel, and really start to broaden your vocabulary around naming emotions, right? There's a lot more than just happy, sad, and angry. And sometimes those are the three that we can get our arms around. So trying to nuance a little bit, what are the collection of feelings that are surfacing? And this is important, not judging those feelings. Not telling ourselves, I shouldn't feel that way. I can't believe I feel this way. I'm embarrassed that I feel this way, right? Just letting the feeling be the feeling. And this is a place where journaling can be super helpful, because if you don't have someone to verbally process with, again, a therapist, a coach, a friend, a family member who's willing to listen, then journaling is a way of getting some of those emotions into words, getting some of those feelings into words, and giving yourself an ability to just sit with them.
Hi, it's Cheryl Ann. Thanks for listening. Did you know that the ideas I share on this show are things I also can help you implement? If you want me in your corner helping you find more time for what fills you up, go to brilliant-balance.com/schedule and sign up for a free exploratory call. Give yourself this time. You'll be so glad you did.
This is where you might want to cry about it. You might want to yell about it, right? But the allowing of the feelings, and again, I think the size of the feelings is going to be related usually to the size of the experience. If it's a really big disappointment, there's going to be a lot more feelings than a smaller disappointment, but they all count and they'll all come with some level of feelings. Your job really is feel it, name it, allow it, right? Let it have an exit valve. Often tears, right, are going to be the exit valve. And those tears can be an exit valve for any kind of emotional overload, for overwhelming sadness or overwhelming anger, right? They both kind of can come out through tears. So this piece is really, really critical because if we skip this, what we will do instead, because remember, these feelings are not going away. They are there, whether we're acknowledging them or not, is we will try to numb them out or deny them or stuff them down, and then they will come back to haunt us. Okay, so simply feeling the feelings associated with the experience and allowing ourselves to have them and acknowledge them is in and of itself really valuable. That's the pain part. We want to thread in episodes of perspective, and sometimes this happens really organically. You know, I was listening to someone process a difficult experience, and she was crying. It was a fresh experience. And she was vacillating really beautifully, like sort of moment to moment between pain and perspective. You know, there would be tears and kind of gritted teeth, and I'm just so sad. And then the next sentence would be, but it's going to be okay because, and then she would insert some positive thing that she had kind of unearthed about the situation. But I'm just so mad would be the next sentence, right? Back to pain. More tears. But I mean, here's a good thing about this. I could look at it this way, back to perspective. So we will vacillate at whatever pace feels organic. Some of us will have to more force ourselves into that gear, right? If we find that we're wallowing in the pain and we can't find an episode of perspective, we want to find a way to really like mechanically move ourselves there, knowing we can go back to pain whenever we need to, okay? And of course, some of us will need to go the other way. We'll be so instinctively in perspective that we will need to create space, some kind of a container where we can actually experience the emotions. So what happens in perspective? Perspective is, again, rooted in logic, and it's where we're going to be a little bit more action-oriented, and also we're going to be forming a narrative that helps us come to terms with the situation. So actions are often, if there's anything I can change about this, this is where I want to exercise that right. And the narrative is helpful if we're trying to come to acceptance. How am I going to get a narrative around this experience that allows me to come to acceptance? So this is where we're talking about things like silver linings, right? Well, this cloud has a silver lining, and this is what it is, right? I lost the job, but I really didn't like the job anyhow. So here's my opportunity to go do something that I really am excited about, right? I'm in this boot and that sucks, but this is an opportunity for me to learn to delegate some of the tasks that I typically take on my shoulders, and maybe that will stick beyond this 8-week episode. Those are examples of things that are like silver linings or the bright side of the situation. Sometimes perspective can be more about lessons learned, right? We can go through an experience and say, man, there was a lot about that was awful. Like, there was a lot about that experience that I would not wish on anyone. And here's what I learned. And there wouldn't have been another way to learn this, that the experience of going through that episode gave me the gift of learning. So let's go back to these heart attacks in my family. You can bet that there has been a lot of discussion in the extended family about heart health, about the warning signs of heart attacks, about it. And again, most of us know some things to look for in heart attacks. I did not know this, but rapid onset indigestion was one of my uncle's symptoms. That was really the primary symptom, was rapid onset sort of heartburn and indigestion that seemed really abnormal to him, right? Like this is not how he typically feels. And it was abnormal enough, thank goodness, to get his attention and get him into the emergency room where they were able to quickly figure out what was going on and do a procedure. That kind of a lesson learned that can then be passed on from all the people who've been taught it, learning things like what is a standard blood pressure and how do we know when it's out of whack and what are we paying attention to in terms of, my other uncle's heart attack presented very differently, more like ongoing fatigue. Like I'm just really short of breath and I feel more fatigued than I typically do doing these tasks. Both of these are very active men who you would not have looked at and said, that's a person who's like a heart attack waiting to happen. Okay. So the lessons learned from these experiences that can get passed on can be part of the perspective. Behavior changes, right? Oh, now I know that there's some things I can do to take better care of myself. And then again, I can pay that lesson forward. There could be lessons learned from any of these experiences. When we don't make the team we want to make, or we're helping a kid go through that experience, there are very important lessons that can be extracted from that experience that they can't learn if they make every single team they ever hoped to, right? The lessons we learn from disappointment are different than the lessons we learn when we're celebrating success. So that's part of the perspective. Perspective can be things that we're actually grateful for about this, what could be perceived as a disappointment, a heartache. Sending my oldest daughter to college has a lot of emotion associated with it, right? There's a lot of heartache in the end of an era and big changes unfolding in our household. And if you're with me sending a child to college, maybe for the first time, or maybe it's your second or third or fourth, you know what that looks like and feels like. And yet there's so much to be celebrated and to be grateful for at the very same time. So looking for that perspective that allows us to come to terms with, but not squash down the painful emotions is kind of the through line we're looking for. And then ultimately part of perspective can be what actions we can take. Is there anything for me to do here? Is there any next step that would be valuable that can keep me moving on to whatever comes next? So let's look at job loss. If you are facing, okay, now I don't have that job, there's a lot of actions that need to be taken to sort through what do we want to do next? How are we going to end up in a situation going forward that's even better than the one we left? I was celebrating with a client who went through this recently and landed truly a dream job. And it took, candidly, a little bit longer than she would have liked, right? She went through job loss. It was hard. It was a really hard timing because she hadn't been in this one for a super long time. And watching her navigate the pain and perspective of this and then get to a place where she landed truly what is a dream for her and be so celebratory about that, like because she consistently took action and didn't just wallow in pain, super awesome, right? So that narrative that we create with perspective gives us the path forward. It helps us move out of any lingering victim mindset where everything is happening to us. And it moves us back into agency where we feel a sense of control over our future. Agency is a very powerful state, and we only get there with perspective. Because while we can't control what happens to us, and we can't, things will happen to us every day that we could not fully control, we have a lot of control over how we talk to ourselves about it and what we do next. So when we integrate these twin Ps, pain and perspective, we're able to fully process these difficult experiences, moving through them and into whatever life holds next for us, right? But if we skip one or the other, it only allows for half processing. And that can keep us stuck somewhere that we really don't want to be. So remember, you might cycle through these twin Ps, pain, then perspective, repeatedly as you're processing the experience. That would be very normal And the more significant the experience, the longer that may go on, right? So just keep cycling. Pain, then perspective, staying open to both, moving through it until you feel better and you're into the next chapter. Okay, hang in there, friends. That's all for today. Till next time, let's be brilliant. And remember, if you're new to the show, take a minute today to subscribe so you never miss an episode. That subscribe button is in every place where you listen to this podcast. And I'm so grateful for those of you who tune in each and every week. So if you are new here, I hope you'll come back next week for another new episode.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.